He called me Uncle Nobody right before hanging up. That's what my 7-year-old nephew said after his father, the same drunk who'd just tried to sell off his dead wife's wedding ring, coached him to cut me out. The same night, Ethan whispered, "Run, Daddy's coming." I raced to the house, lights blazing, Laura's photo album scattered across the floor, Todd blocking the door with a scotch in one hand and a smirk in the other. "If you show up again, you'll never see him again." He had custody, control, and a fake letter from Laura that said he should have it all. But what Todd didn't know, I had her voice too, in Ethan's recordings, and 30 days to bring him down. And I wasn't cutting any corners. My name is Jake Mercer and I'm 45 years old. I run a small carpentry shop where I spend my days crafting custom cabinets and teaching my nephew Ethan the same lessons my sister Laura drilled into me. Measure twice, cut once. The workshop still holds her memory in every corner, from the cedar shavings dusting the floor to Ethan's crayon drawings tacked next to my ancient wall clock. My brother-in-law Todd shows up sometimes, all designer suits and perfect smiles, talking about investment opportunities with a smoothness that sets my teeth on edge. But I've got 2 secret weapons. An ironclad promise I made at Laura's grave, and my old friend Michael Donnelly, an attorney who knows exactly how bitter custody battles can turn. Ethan isn't my son by blood, but he's mine in every way that matters. But let me start from the beginning. The call came at midnight. My phone buzzed against the workbench where I'd fallen asleep finishing Mrs. Peterson's kitchen cabinets. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "Run, Daddy's coming." My stomach dropped. "Where are you, buddy?" "In my room. At Dad's." His words tumbled out between shallow breaths. "He's really mad. He said he's gonna sell Mom's stuff." I was already grabbing my keys. "Stay in your room. I'm on my way." The streets were empty as I sped across town to Todd's place, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. You ever notice how time stretches when you're racing to someone who needs you? I kept rehearsing what I'd say to calm a scared 7-year-old. But my mind kept drifting to Laura's funeral 3 months ago. The way Todd had worked the room, all practiced grief and careful charm. The custody hearing came a week later. Just a formality, they said. After all, who'd challenge a biological father's rights? The house blazed with lights when I pulled up. Through the bay window, I could see the living room was a mess. Laura's photo albums scattered across the floor, her antique desk drawers hanging open. A door slammed somewhere inside, and I caught Ethan's shadow moving past his upstairs window. I knocked firmly. "Todd, it's Jake. Just want to check on Ethan." The door swung open. Todd filled the frame, designer shirt wrinkled, that perfect smile gone stiff around the edges. The smell of expensive scotch rolled off him in waves. "It's midnight," he said, voice clipped. "This is private property." "I know." Ethan called, sounded upset. "Just need to see he's okay." Todd stepped closer, dropping his voice. "Let me be clear. You show up at my house again uninvited, you won't see him at all. I can make that happen." My hands curled into fists, but I forced them open. Getting arrested for assault wouldn't help Ethan. 2 minutes with him, that's all I'm asking. "Get off my property." Todd's words slurred slightly. "Now." I backed away to the sidewalk, pulled out my phone, and called Ethan. Todd watched from the doorway as I waited through 4 rings. "Uncle Jake?" Ethan's voice was small. "Hey buddy, lock your door, okay? Stay in your room till morning. I'll see you tomorrow after school. Promise?" "Promise." I ended the call, my throat tight. Todd was still watching, that artificial smile back in place. I pointed my phone at the living room window and snapped a few pictures of the mess inside. Documentation for later. You learn to think that way when you're dealing with someone like Todd. Every detail matters. I got in my truck but didn't start it right away. Through the windshield, I watched Todd shut the door, saw shadows move across the windows. The house Laura had filled with warmth now felt like a fortress keeping her son from me. My hands were shaking as I pulled away, but not from fear. You know that slow burn that starts in your gut when you realize someone's got power over you. That's what it was. I drove home to my quiet workshop, where Laura's old tools still hung on the wall next to mine. The cedar shavings I'd swept into a pile earlier caught the moonlight, and for a second, I could almost hear her voice. "Patience, little brother. There's always another way." She was right, of course. I couldn't fight Todd with fists or fury, but I knew someone who could help me fight him the smart way. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Mike Donnelly's number. It was late, but Mike would understand. He'd been through his own custody hell years ago. I looked at the time, 12:47 a.m. In a few hours, Todd would either forget his threat or use it as a weapon. Either way, I needed a plan before sunrise. Mike's office always reminded me of an old library, all dark wood and leather-bound books. At 6 a.m., the place was empty except for us. Morning light just starting to creep through the Venetian blinds. You know those moments when everything feels both urgent and oddly peaceful? That was this morning. Start from the beginning, Mike said, sliding a cup of coffee across his desk. And Jake? Don't leave anything out. I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos from Todd's house. Got these around midnight. Ethan called scared. Todd was drunk, threatening to sell Laura's things. Mike's pen moved steadily across his legal pad while I talked. He had that focused look I remembered from our high school days, the same expression he wore before football games. Only now his opponent was paperwork instead of linebackers. How long's this been building? He asked. Remember Laura's funeral? Todd worked that room like a politician. The memory of that day made my coffee taste bitter. All sympathy and soft words. But the moment the custody hearing ended, things changed. Started with little stuff, canceling Ethan's weekend visits, claiming schedule conflicts. Then Laura's things began disappearing from the house. Mike nodded, still writing. Classic pattern. Charm in public, control in private. You've been documenting everything? What I could. Got texts, emails, dates of canceled visits. I pulled up my phone calendar. Even recorded some conversations where Todd promised makeup time with Ethan. Never happened. He reached for a thick law book, tabs marking specific pages. Here's where we stand. We can file emergency motions for temporary visitation review based on last night. Those photos help, shows unstable environment. But we need to be surgical about this. Mike leaned forward. One wrong move, like trespassing or harassment, and Todd's lawyers will paint you as the problem. So what's the play? First, we document everything. And I mean everything. Every call, text, canceled visit. Second, we build a paper trail through proper channels. He started typing on his computer. I'm drafting motions now. Meanwhile, call Ethan's school counselor. Don't raise custody alarms, just register concern about last night. We need neutral observers. I checked my watch. 7:15 a.m. School office opens at 8. Perfect. Mike's printer hummed to life. I'll have these motions filed electronically before lunch. We'll request an emergency hearing. Should get one within 72 hours. The school counselor, Ms. Chen, picked up on the first ring at 8:05. I kept it simple. Mentioned Ethan might be tired from a rough night. Asked her to keep an eye out. She'd known Laura. I could hear the concern in her careful responses. I'll check in with him during lunch, she promised, discreetly. By 11:30, Mike had filed everything. I watched over his shoulder as he clicked Submit on the court's website. The confirmation number popped up, and something tight in my chest loosened just a fraction. Remember what I said about measuring twice, cutting once? Legal works the same way. Precision matters. Each document Mike filed was another plank in the foundation we were building. But Todd? He was already moving. The email came at 2:47 p.m., copied to Mike and the court clerk. Pure Todd. Polished words hiding sharp edges. He described me as an emotionally overwrought uncle who was disrupting established routines, called my midnight visit alarming, and suggested I needed professional help to process my grief. Mike read it twice, then looked at me. He's good, setting up his performance for the judge. Grieving father versus unstable uncle. I thought about Ethan's voice on that midnight call, about Laura's scattered photos on Todd's floor. Yeah. Well, we've got something he doesn't. What's that? The truth. I picked up one of the motions, reading the stark timeline of Todd's actions. Question is, will it be enough? Mike started organizing papers into his trial folder. Truth's like wood, Jake. Strongest when you know how to work with its grain. Now, we just need to show the judge which way that grain really runs. The courthouse hallway buzzed with that special kind of tension you only find where families fight over kids and cash. Mike and I sat on a hard wooden bench, watching faces drift past. Some triumphant, others crushed. You know that saying about justice being blind? Sometimes I think she's just tired. Docket 247, Mercer Visitation Review, the clerk called at 4:15 p.m. We'd been waiting since 2. The courtroom felt exactly like you'd expect. All polished wood and hollow echoes. Judge Harrison peered down from her bench, reading glasses catching the fluorescent light. She had that seen-it-all expression most family court judges wear like armor. Mike stood first, his voice steady. Your Honor, we're seeking emergency review based on concerning behavior documented last night. He held up my photos. The minor child, Ethan, called his uncle. My client, in distress. I watched Todd while Mike talked. He sat there in his $1,000 suit, looking concerned and reasonable, even nodded at the right moments, like he was taking mental notes on how to be a better father. Made my stomach turn. The photos show clear evidence of drinking and unsafe conditions, Mike continued, passing copies to the clerk. Additionally, the transcript of Ethan's call indicates. Judge Harrison held up her hand. I've reviewed the filing, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Peterson? She gestured to Todd's attorney. Todd stood, straightening his tie. Your Honor, we acknowledge last night was unfortunate. My client had a difficult evening. The anniversary of his wife's passing approaches. He paused, letting that sink in. He's already enrolled in counseling and is committed to maintaining stability for Ethan. My hands clenched under the table. Using Laura's death like that. It took everything I had to stay quiet. Mr. Mercer's heart is in the right place, Todd added, glancing at me with practiced sympathy. But his midnight visits and constant monitoring are creating anxiety for Ethan. We're simply asking for appropriate boundaries. The judge studied both sides, then sighed. While I appreciate Mr. Mercer's concern, I'm not seeing evidence of immediate risk warranting emergency modification. She adjusted her glasses. I encourage both parties to maintain civil communication through proper channels. Motion denied without prejudice. Just like that. 3 hours of waiting for 3 minutes of no. Todd caught up to us in the hallway. Jake, he called, voice carrying just enough for others to hear. I'm handling some responsible fiduciary action for Ethan's future. Thought you should know. Mike stepped forward. Care to elaborate? Just ensuring his security. Todd's smile didn't reach his eyes. Being a good father means planning ahead. He checked his watch, then slipped past us toward the elevator. Mike grabbed my arm before I could follow. Let it go. Something's off about that phrasing. Fiduciary action. Too specific. We spent the next hour in Mike's office. Him working his contacts while I paced. The coffee got cold, then got reheated, then got cold again. At 6:45, Mike's computer pinged. Found it, he said, voice tight. Todd filed paperwork to liquidate Ethan's trust fund. Says it's for a time-sensitive development opportunity. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. How much? All of it. Laura's life insurance, college savings, everything. Mike scrolled through documents. He's claiming guardian authority to reinvest in some commercial project. Says it'll triple Ethan's money. When? 30 days. That's the mandatory notice period before he can touch it. Mike looked up at me. Jake, this development thing. It's got red flags all over it. But if we can't prove it's fraudulent before the 30 days, I sank into a chair, remembering Laura's voice the day she set up that trust. It's his future, she'd said. Promise me you'll watch over it. Now her son's security was about to vanish into one of Todd's schemes. Mike started pulling files. Okay, new strategy. We've got 30 days to either block the liquidation or prove he's not acting in Ethan's interests. He grabbed a legal pad. But Jake? Todd's got charm, custody, and the court's ear. We need more than suspicion. We need evidence that hits like a sledgehammer. The wall clock ticked, each sound like a footstep walking away with Ethan's future. 30 days. 4 weeks to uncover what Todd was really planning. The judge wanted proof? Fine. Time to start digging. Mike didn't waste a minute after the courthouse. Your shop or my office? He asked, already pulling out his phone. Shop, I said. Got better coffee, and we can spread out on the workbench. Plus, I needed the smell of sawdust and varnish to keep me steady. Know what's funny about gathering evidence? It's a lot like building custom cabinets. You measure twice, document everything, and make sure all your pieces line up perfect before assembly. One crooked joint can ruin the whole project. By 7 that evening, my workbench looked more like a war room than a carpentry station. Mike had his laptop open, legal pads everywhere, while I mapped out Todd's neighborhood on graph paper. Start with the neighbors, Mike said. They see everything, especially in those cookie-cutter developments. I grabbed my keys. I know just where to start. Mrs. Chen lived 3 doors down from Todd. Sweet lady, always watching from behind her curtains. She'd helped Laura plant tulips once. Oh yes, she said when I explained why I was there. Many loud nights lately. Last weekend, very bad. Shouting, doors slamming until 2 in morning. Poor Ethan. I see him sitting alone on porch sometimes. Mike's affidavit template got its first entry. The Hendersons across the street had security cameras. Got footage of him stumbling home most Saturdays, Mr. Henderson said, clicking through files. Last month he backed over his own mailbox. Want me to save those clips? You bet we did. Between neighbors, I called Ethan. Had to be careful here. No coaching, no leading questions. Just uncle-nephew talk with Mike's phone recording for legal backup. Hey buddy, how about you tell me about bedtime at your house? Dad's usually not home, Ethan said. I make my own dinner most nights. Remember how Mom used to read to me? Nobody does that anymore. My chest tightened. You still have that tablet I got you for Christmas? Yeah. The one with the good microphone? Smart kid. He knew exactly what I was asking. Maybe record some of your evening routine? The school counselor mentioned she'd like to know how you're doing. I can do that, he said quietly. Dad talks really loud on his phone at night anyway. While Ethan gathered his evidence, I remembered something else. All those times I'd picked him up for weekend visits. How Todd's home office desk was always covered in papers. Banking slips, investment documents, stuff he never bothered to hide because who'd be looking. My phone still had photos from when I'd helped Ethan find his homework in that mess. Mike nodded when I showed him. Perfect. I'll subpoena all of the official records to match these. Dates, amounts, everything. He was already typing. With the trust fund liquidation pending, the court has to consider financial evidence. By midnight, we had a timeline stretching across my workshop wall. Bank statements, neighbor testimonies, security footage, Ethan's recordings, all lined up like fence posts marking Todd's path from charming widower to whatever he was becoming. Look at this pattern, Mike said, tracing dates with his pen. Weekend binges escalating, suspicious withdrawals increasing, nights away from home becoming routine. He grabbed a fresh legal pad. We file first thing tomorrow. Judge Harrison wants proof of risk? Here's 30 pages of it. Chronological and notarized. I stepped back, studying our work. For the first time since that midnight call, something felt solid under my feet. Think it's enough? To force a review? Yes. To stop him completely? Mike shrugged. Depends what he does when he sees us coming. We spent another hour organizing everything into labeled folders, the kind that make judges happy. I set my alarm for 5 a.m., early enough to catch the court clerk before the morning rush. Looking at that wall of evidence, I remembered Laura's voice. Measure twice, cut once. We'd measured everything now. Dates, dollars, decibels of Todd's drunken rants. Time to start cutting. I locked up the shop, double-checking the alarm system I'd installed after Laura died. Standing there in the quiet, watching Mike's taillights disappear, I felt something I hadn't since the funeral. Momentum. We weren't just reacting anymore. We had a plan, we had proof, and most importantly, we had truth on our side. The sun wasn't even up when Mike and I pushed through the courthouse doors. Our evidence packet made a satisfying thud on the clerk's desk, thick enough to raise eyebrows even at this hour. Morning docket's already packed, she warned, stamping our filing. But I'll flag it urgent. You know that hollow feeling when you're waiting for news that could change everything? The courthouse corridor felt like that. All echoes and tension. Mike paced, checking his watch every few minutes while I tried not to wear a path in the freshly waxed floor. The whole place smelled like industrial cleaner and burnt coffee from the security desk. Remember, Mike said, let me do the talking. Your job is to look steady and concerned, no matter what Todd brings. Speaking of the devil, Todd's attorney showed up right on schedule, some downtown type with expensive shoes and a thin manila folder. Just one folder, when we'd brought a box load, but there was something about how he held it, like he knew exactly what was inside. A blue tab stuck out the top, marked Laura in neat block letters. Ever get that sinking feeling right before bad news hits? Yeah, that tab had trouble written all over it. The judge called us in ahead of schedule. Small mercy there. Mike laid out our case clean and quick. The midnight calls, the drinking, the neighbor statements, all of it. I kept my eyes on the bench, trying to project that steady concern Mike had coached. Then Todd's lawyer stood up, holding that damn folder like it was made of gold. Your Honor, while we appreciate the uncle's enthusiasm, we have a document that puts this matter to rest. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. A letter from Laura Mercer herself, expressing her explicit wishes regarding guardianship and financial authority. My stomach dropped. The letter looked perfect. Laura's personal stationery, her flowing handwriting, even that little curl she put on her wise. But my sister would have never written those words. In the event of my passing, Todd shall have sole guardianship and full financial discretion over Ethan's care and assets. Mike tensed beside me. We both knew Laura had been meticulous about Ethan's trust fund. She'd built in safeguards, checks, and balances. This letter stripped them all away. The judge studied the paper, glancing between it and our stack of evidence. This appears to be the deceased mother's clear intent, he said. Given this express wish, I'm not inclined to intervene without more compelling proof of immediate danger. Just like that, months of work started crumbling. Mike argued about the letter's timing, its convenience, but I could see we were losing ground. The judge was already reaching for his next case file. "Petition denied," he announced. "Mr. Mercer, while your concern is noted, this court must respect parental rights and the mother's stated preferences." Todd didn't even smirk on his way out. He didn't have to. I tried calling Ethan that afternoon, our regular Tuesday check-in, straight to voicemail. I tried again at dinner time. Nothing. Finally, around 8, he picked up. "Hey, buddy," I said, trying to sound normal. "Missed you earlier." I was busy. His voice had this flat tone I'd never heard before. "That's okay. How about we grab ice cream this weekend? That new place by the park. Dad says I should focus on school stuff." A pause. "He says you're just causing problems." My throat got tight. "Ethan, you know that's not. I have homework." Another pause. "Bye, Uncle Nobody." The phone clicked dead. I sat there in my workshop, staring at Laura's old rocking chair, feeling like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. Uncle Nobody. That had to be Todd's words coming through Ethan's mouth. Mike found me there an hour later, still sitting in the dark. "Jake," he flipped on the lights. "This isn't over. You saw that letter," I said. "Perfect forgery. And now Ethan won't even listen to me." Mike pulled up a chair. "That folder was too neat, too ready. And those company names in the trust paperwork? Something's not adding up. Give me one more shot at the money trail. Whatever's behind that blue tab, I bet it's hiding something bigger." I looked at my friend's determined face, remembering how he'd rebuilt his own life after his divorce wars. "One more angle, one more dig," he promised. "Deep as we have to go. You know what they say about desperate men? They make mistakes. Even smart ones like Todd. Maybe especially the smart ones. They get so caught up in their own cleverness they forget to check the details." 3 days after that courtroom disaster, Mike called me at dawn. "Get over here. Bring coffee. Strong coffee." I found him in his conference room, task lights blazing like an operating theater. The whole table was covered in papers, certified copies of everything Todd had submitted. Mike had that intense look he gets when he's onto something, the same look he had back when we were kids, and he'd figured out who'd been stealing from the corner store. "Look at this," he said, tapping a document with his pen. "Really look at it." I leaned in. At first glance, it was just another financial statement, but Mike pointed to the letterhead, then to another document. "See how the fonts don't quite match? This one's Calibri, that one's Arial. Small difference, but banks don't make those kinds of mistakes. They use templates." He was right. Once you noticed it, you couldn't unnotice it. Like spotting a crooked picture frame, it just jumps out at you. "And here," Mike continued, circling account numbers. "This sequence appears in statements supposedly from 3 different banks. That's not how routing numbers work." I pulled up a chair, my coffee forgotten. "Show me more." We spent the next 4 hours dissecting every piece of paper. I started tracking company names Todd had listed as vendors for his supposed development project. Half of them didn't exist in any business registry I could find. The other half were real companies, all right, but they'd never heard of Todd or his project. You ever watched one of those crime shows where they put all the evidence on a wall with string connecting everything? That's what Mike's conference room started looking like. Only instead of red string, we had yellow highlighter marking every inconsistency. "Here's where he got sloppy," Mike said, spreading out 3 financial statements. "See these formatting errors? The way the columns don't quite line up? Now look at this." He pulled out the letter supposedly from Laura. Same misalignment. Same person created all of these. My hands were steady for the first time in days as I sorted everything into categories. Forged documents, doctored statements, fake company records. It wasn't just a pile of complaints anymore. It was a chain of evidence showing deliberate fraud. "We need to trace where the real money's going," Mike said, drafting a discovery request. "A legitimate development project leaves a trail. Permits, contractor bids, material purchases. We'll demand proof of every single transaction." I printed out a timeline, matching withdrawal dates against Todd's public statements about his big plans. The pattern was clear as day once you knew what to look for. "Jake." Mike's voice had that tone that made me look up. "Real money leaves footprints, not smudges. These documents?" He waved at the paper-covered table. "They're all smudges." He grabbed a fresh legal pad. "We're going to request every original bank record, every wire transfer receipt, every corporate filing. But here's the beauty. We already know what we won't find. Because none of it's real," I said, finally seeing the whole picture. Mike nodded, that grim smile back on his face. "Todd's not just forging letters anymore. He's creating an entire paper world to hide something. And paper worlds? He picked up Laura's forged letter. They fall apart under the right pressure. We spent another hour organizing everything into clear, documented patterns of deception. Mike's discovery request would force Todd to either produce genuine records, which we knew didn't exist, or reveal what he was really doing with Ethan's trust fund. File it first thing tomorrow? I asked, standing to leave. No, Mike was already typing. We file this right now. Todd's had enough time to cover his tracks. I watched him work, remembering Laura's voice. Measure twice, cut once. Well, we'd measured everything. Every font, every number, every date. Now it was time to start cutting. The discovery documents landed on Mike's desk in 3 thick, manila envelopes. You know that feeling when you're building a cabinet and something's not quite square? That's how these papers felt. Everything looked right at first glance, but the angles were all wrong. Look at these routing numbers, Mike said, spreading statements across his desk. They're flowing through companies I've never seen before. Golden Summit Holdings, Platinum Ridge Investments, big fancy names for companies that don't seem to have any employees. I pulled up a chair, my coffee going cold beside stacks of bank records. You ever notice how money leaves a trail like sawdust in a workshop? Following it tells you exactly where the work's being done. Only this trail led nowhere. Or so it seemed at first. These shell companies, Mike muttered, typing account numbers into his computer. They're just empty boxes passing money around. But money has to land somewhere, eventually. We spent hours tracking transfers from one holding company to another. Each one had a grand name but no substance, like those fake storefronts they use in movie sets. Pretty to look at, nothing behind them. Got something, Mike said around midnight. His voice had that edge it gets when he's found the loose thread that'll unravel everything. Look at this account in the Cayman Islands. The numbers were big. Real big. But what caught my eye was the name on the companion account, Jessica Reeves. Meant nothing to me at first, until Mike pulled up Todd's social media. Remember those business trips Todd kept taking? Mike clicked through photos. Look who keeps showing up in the background. There she was. Tall, blonde, maybe 30. Always just far enough away to seem casual, but in too many pictures to be coincidence. My stomach clenched as dates aligned. Todd's trips matched perfectly with large transfers to that offshore account. Son of a bitch, I whispered. The truth hit like a hammer blow. There was no real estate development. Never had been. Todd had built a paper maze to funnel Ethan's trust fund straight to his mistress's secret account. I thought of Laura, how she'd trusted Todd with everything. Her son, her legacy, her life's work. The betrayal burned hot in my chest. But Mike's voice cut through the anger. We need to focus, he said, grabbing a legal pad. Having proof is one thing. Getting it admitted in court is another. And we're running out of time. He was right. Of the 30 days Todd had given himself to drain the trust fund, we had maybe 5 left, maybe less. First, Mike said, writing fast, we need these banking records authenticated. I know someone who can certify international transfers. Owes me a favor. I nodded, forcing myself to think clearly. What about Ethan? If Todd realizes we know, already on it. I've drafted emergency protective orders. They're sitting on the judge's clerk's desk. One phone call from us, and Todd loses access to Ethan until the hearing. We spent another hour building our timeline. Every transfer, every photo, every fake company filing, all arranged to tell a story even a busy judge couldn't ignore. We need a hearing date, I said, checking the calendar. Before Todd can move that money. Mike picked up his phone. Margaret? Mike Donnelly. Listen, I need a favor. Biggest one yet. I watched him negotiate with the court clerk, his face getting tighter by the minute. Finally, he hung up. She can give us Thursday at 2 p.m., he said. It's cutting it close. The trust fund transfer is set for Friday morning. I circled Thursday's date twice in my workshop calendar, then underlined it for good measure. Timing would be everything, like clamping a joint before the glue sets. Mike started organizing papers into his trial briefcase. Get some sleep, Jake. Tomorrow we start rehearsing exactly how we present this. We've got one shot to make the judge understand what's really happening. Ever turned your workspace into something it wasn't meant to be? My workshop became mission control that week. Gone were the usual stacks of lumber samples and finishing tests. Instead, binders lined my workbench like soldiers at attention, each one labeled with dates and account numbers. You know that smell of fresh sawdust and varnish that usually fills my shop? Replaced by printer ink and coffee. Lots of coffee. The whiteboard where I sketch cabinet designs now held a calendar with Thursday circled in red, every hour planned like a military operation. Chain of custody, Mike kept saying, shuffling papers at my assembly table. Everything has to be pristine. One break in the paper trail, and Todd's lawyer will drive a truck through it. I watched him coordinate with his contact at the International Banking Commission, making sure every offshore document would hold up. The guy had some fancy title I couldn't pronounce, but his signature carried weight with the courts. Remember when Laura taught us woodworking? I asked, organizing another file. How she'd make us measure everything 3 times before making a single cut. Mike looked up from his laptop. Yeah. And you'd get frustrated, wanting to just get on with it. She was right, though. Always was. The memory of her patience hit me hard. How she'd guide my hands on the measuring tape, teaching precision when all I wanted was speed. We had the school counselor, Mrs. Chen, helping with Ethan's part. Smart woman. She knew exactly how to keep him safe while preserving the recordings he'd already made. No more recordings, buddy, I told him over the phone, Mrs. Chen monitoring nearby. What you've done is perfect. Just focus on school now, okay? Okay, Uncle Jake. His voice sounded steadier these days. That helped. But Wednesday night, sitting alone in my shop after Mike left, doubt crept in like cold air under a door. The judge had bought Todd's act before. Why would tomorrow be different? I stared at our evidence. All these careful measurements, all these precise cuts, and felt the floor tilt beneath me. My phone buzzed. Mike, you're spiraling, aren't you? He asked without preamble. How'd you know? Because I know you. Listen, remember what Laura always said about trust? Measure twice, cut once, he finished. Then trust the line. We've measured everything, Jake. Every transfer, every fake company, every lie. Trust the line. I ran my hand over the nearest binder. The pages inside tracked Todd's betrayal down to the penny. Yeah, okay. Get some sleep, Mike said. Tomorrow we show the judge exactly who Todd really is. Thursday morning arrived with a surprise. News vans outside the courthouse. Seems Todd's real estate ventures had caught some reporters' attention. Great. I pulled into the parking garage at 8:30, our evidence boxes secure in my truck's cab. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Todd arrive in his shiny BMW, stepping out in what had to be a $1,000 suit. He smiled and waved at the cameras like he was running for office. Nice performance, Mike muttered, meeting me at the truck. Let's see how long that smile lasts. We loaded our boxes onto a cart, each one checked and double-checked. Walking toward the courthouse entrance, I could feel the weight of Laura's lessons in every step. Measure twice, cut once, trust the line. The metal detector loomed ahead, uniformed deputies waving people through. I squeezed the handle of my briefcase. Documents inside arranged with carpenter's precision. Todd's performance might be perfect, but our measurements were better. My phone vibrated. A text from Mrs. Chen. Ethan's safe at school, focusing on his math test. Good luck. That steadied me. Because this wasn't about revenge or even justice anymore. It was about protection. About building something solid that would keep Ethan safe, just like Laura would have wanted. I took one last look at Todd holding court with reporters before stepping through security. He was still playing to the cameras, still betting that appearance would beat truth. Time to show him what real precision could do. The courtroom had that unique smell. Old wood, anxiety, and floor polish. You ever notice how time moves differently in places like that? Like wading through syrup while trying to look calm. Judge Harrison settled into her chair, adjusting reading glasses that had seen thousands of cases just like this one. Well, maybe not just like this one. Your Honor, Mike began, standing with that quiet confidence I'd come to trust. This isn't a complex matter at its core. It's about a guardian systematically draining a child's trust fund through fraudulent means. I kept my eyes forward, though I could feel Todd's presence 2 tables away. Mike laid out our timeline with surgical precision. The midnight call, the bank records, the shell companies that led nowhere except to hidden accounts. Todd's lawyer, Peterson, was one of those expensively groomed types who probably charged by the breath. He shot up like a jack-in-the-box. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is presenting inadmissible hearsay and documentation obtained through questionable means. My client's privacy rights, if I may? Mike interrupted smoothly. We've brought the custodian of records to authenticate every document. And as for privacy, he pulled out a blue folder that matched the weight of my heartbeat. These transfers were discovered through proper discovery channels. Judge Harrison peered over those glasses. Let's establish foundation then. Call your witness. The bank's records custodian, Mr. Chen, took the stand. No relation to Mrs. Chen at Ethan's school. Funny coincidence, though. He walked through each document like he was teaching a class, explaining how international transfers leave traces even when someone tries to hide them. I watched Todd during the testimony. Remember how I said I learned to measure twice? Well, I measured every tick in his jaw, every time his fingers drummed the table, every glance toward the gallery where that reporter kept scratching away in her notebook. And these routing numbers, Mr. Chen continued, pointing to a projection screen, they all terminate at this same account in the Cayman Islands, registered to a Sarah Winters. Todd's right leg started bouncing under the table. I'd seen wood splinter with less tension than what was running through him right now. Mike methodically entered each exhibit into evidence. A1, bank statements. A2, shell company registrations. A3, transfer records. Each tab like another nail in a coffin built of numbers. Your Honor, Mike said, we'd also like to present audio recordings made by Ethan Mercer. Peterson nearly knocked over his water glass standing up. Absolutely not. These recordings were made without my client's knowledge or consent. The judge held up her hand. Counsel approach. They huddled at the bench, voices low but intense. I caught fragments. Child safety and context and limited scope. Judge Harrison leaned back. I'll allow the recordings with narrow parameters, only those relevant to the child's safety and the financial discussions. Mr. Donnelly, proceed with caution. Mike nodded and queued up the first clip. Ethan's small voice filled the courtroom, scared but clear. Daddy, why are you taking my college money? Mom said. Todd's voice, slurred. Your mom's not here anymore, is she? This is a sure thing. Better than some stupid college fund. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the rage settle somewhere manageable. When I opened them, Todd was staring at the gallery again, where the reporter had stopped writing to just listen. 3 more clips played. Each one a precise measurement of Todd's true character, laid out in his own words. Now, Judge Harrison said, looking directly at Todd, perhaps you can explain these withdrawals marked as project milestones. According to these records, over $2 million has been transferred since January. Peterson whispered urgently to Todd, who had gone pale under his expensive tan. Your Honor, we'd like to request a brief recess to review these materials. The judge checked her watch. You have 20 minutes. But Mr. Peterson, she tapped her glasses against the bench. These numbers aren't going to change during your review. As the bailiff called recess, I watched Todd practically run from the courtroom, Peterson struggling to keep up. Mike leaned over to me, voice low. Notice how he didn't take his briefcase? Man in a hurry never forgets his lifeline unless he knows it's worthless. I nodded, remembering Laura's voice. Measure twice, cut once. We'd measured everything. Now we just had to trust the line. When recess ended, Todd slunk back in like a dog that knew it was about to get caught digging holes. His lawyer didn't look much better. You know that look when someone realizes they've brought a butter knife to a gunfight? Yeah, that one. Mike stood up, straightening his tie. Your Honor, I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit C7. The projector hummed to life, showing a bank transfer dated March 15th. Mr. Coleman, Mike addressed Todd directly. You testified under oath last month that on March 15th you attended a critical zoning meeting for your development project, is that correct? Todd cleared his throat. Yes, that's accurate. Interesting. Mike lifted another document. Because this transfer shows you withdrew $250,000 at 2:15 p.m. that day from a bank in Miami. That's quite a commute from our local zoning office, wouldn't you say? Peterson jumped in. Your Honor, my client travels frequently for business. I'm sure he does, Mike cut in smoothly. Which is why we contacted the zoning board. He held up a certified letter. According to their records, no meeting was scheduled that day. In fact, no application for zoning changes has ever been filed under any of Mr. Coleman's companies. I watched Todd's face do this funny little dance between panic and anger. Made me think of the time I caught Ethan with his hand in the cookie jar. Except Ethan had only stolen cookies, not his own son's future. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Coleman, would you care to explain this discrepancy? Todd loosened his collar. There must be some confusion with the dates. I meet with many officials. Perhaps this will help clear up the confusion, Mike interrupted, pulling up another exhibit. Here's a hotel receipt from Miami, same date, room booked under Todd Coleman. He paused. And here's a restaurant charge from the same evening. 2 dinners, signed by Sarah Winters. The gallery rustled like leaves in a storm. I caught the reporter's pen moving double time. Your Honor, Todd started, standing up so fast his chair squeaked. These personal matters have nothing to do with— They have everything to do with this case, Mike said firmly. You claimed under oath that every withdrawal was for legitimate business expenses. Yet we have proven that multiple withdrawals coincide not with business meetings, but with trips to visit Ms. Winters. The judge removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose. I've seen enough. Let's move to closing arguments before lunch. She checked her watch. Keep them brief, counselors. Peterson went first, all polish and practice sympathy. Your Honor, my client is a grieving widower doing his best to provide for his son. Yes, perhaps some business decisions were poorly documented, but his heart, I couldn't help muttering. Mike squeezed my arm, keeping me in check. Todd stood for his final appeal, and I'll give him this. He knew how to put on a show, voice cracking just right, hands spread wide. I loved Laura. Everything I've done has been to secure Ethan's future. If I've made mistakes, they come from trying to be both mother and father to a boy who lost too much. The pressure, the loneliness. He dabbed his eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. I only wanted what was best. Mike stood slowly, hands clasped behind his back. He let the silence stretch for 3 long beats, then delivered just one sentence. Your Honor, grief does not create shell companies. The gallery actually gasped. I've never heard a room full of people forget to breathe all at once before. Judge Harrison gathered her papers. I'll review these materials in chambers and return with my ruling after lunch. She stood, then paused. Mr. Coleman, I suggest you remain in the building. The bailiff called, "All rise," and the judge disappeared through her door. The gallery erupted in whispers, and I watched Todd huddle with his lawyer, gesturing frantically. Mike touched my shoulder. 1 hour, he said quietly. After 6 months of fights, just 1 more hour. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. I thought about Laura's rocking chair, still sitting on my porch where Todd couldn't sell it. About Ethan's drawings in my workshop. About promises kept and lines measured twice. The reporter caught my eye as she headed out, notepad full. She gave me a small nod, like she already knew which way the wind was blowing. We all did. The hour crawled by like sap in winter. Mike and I grabbed coffee from the vending machine. Terrible stuff. But it gave my hands something to do besides shake. You ever notice how time moves differently when you're waiting for someone to decide your whole future? At exactly 1 o'clock, the bailiff's "All rise" brought us back to our feet. Judge Harrison settled into her chair with a stack of papers that looked heavier than before lunch. My mouth went desert dry. Be seated, she said, adjusting her glasses. After reviewing the extensive documentation presented today, I find clear and convincing evidence of financial malfeasance regarding the trust fund established for minor child Ethan Coleman. Todd's attorney started to rise. The judge held up one hand, stopping him cold. The evidence shows systematic withdrawal of funds under false pretenses, creation of shell companies to obscure transactions, and diversion of assets to personal accounts held jointly with Sarah Winters. She fixed Todd with a steel-cutter stare. Mr. Coleman, this court finds your actions constitute embezzlement of funds held in trust for a minor. The word embezzlement hit the room like a thunderclap. I heard pens scratching furiously in the gallery. Given the severity of these findings, immediate action is required to protect both the child and remaining assets. She shuffled papers. Custody of Ethan Coleman is hereby transferred to Jacob Mercer, effective immediately. My legs went wobbly. Mike steadied me with a hand on my shoulder. Furthermore, the judge continued, Todd Coleman is ordered to repay all misappropriated funds to the trust account within 30 days, with statutory penalties and legal fees assessed. The total sum, she named a number that made Todd's face go ghost white. Failure to comply will result in criminal referral to the district attorney's office. Todd jumped up. Your Honor, this is outrageous. I can explain. Sit down, Mr. Coleman, Judge Harrison snapped. This is not a debate. She nodded to the bailiff. Please outline the custody transfer procedures. The bailiff stepped forward with a clipboard. Mr. Mercer, Ethan can be picked up from his school at 3:15. You'll need to show ID in these court papers. Mr. Coleman is not to interfere with the transfer or attempt contact without prior court approval. Simple words, simple steps. But they meant everything was changing, right there, in that moment. Judge Harrison gave one final rap of her gavel. We're adjourned. The gallery erupted in motion. I barely had time to shake Mike's hand before the reporters started swarming. Camera flashes popped like lightning as we pushed toward the door. Todd's voice rose behind us, high and cracking. This is a conspiracy. They've twisted everything. I'll appeal. More cameras swung his way, hungry for the meltdown. Mike guided me through the crowd and down the courthouse steps. The afternoon sun hit like a spotlight, and suddenly there were microphones everywhere. Mr. Mercer, how long have you suspected? What about the offshore accounts? Any comment on Sarah Winters? I kept my head down, letting Mike clear a path. Todd burst out the doors behind us, still shouting. You think you've won? You think this is over? I'll show everyone what's really. A reporter thrust a mic in his face, and he took the bait. Started ranting about frame jobs and setup jobs and who knows what else. Each word was another nail in his coffin, and the cameras ate it up. I checked my watch, 1:45. Plenty of time to get to Ethan's school. Time enough to make sure his room was ready, to heat up some soup, to start making things right. Mike helped me into my truck, parked at the curb. You okay to drive? I nodded, hands steady on the wheel. Gotta get his room ready. Laura's old quilt's already on the bed. Call me if you need anything. And Jake? He smiled. You did it. You really did it. I started the engine, drowning out Todd's continued rants from the steps. The dashboard clock showed we'd beaten his 30-day deadline by almost a week. Measure twice, cut once. Laura would have been proud of that timing. The reporters were still circling Todd like sharks that smelled blood in the water. His reputation was burning down in real time, and every camera there would splash it across tonight's news. But I had more important things to think about. I had a boy to pick up from school, a safe place to bring him home to, a promise to keep. The afternoon sun slanted long shadows across the streets as I drove us home. Ethan dozed in the passenger seat, worn out from the day's emotions. Every few blocks, I'd glance over just to make sure he was really there, really safe. You ever notice how victory feels different than you expect? Here I was, finally winning everything we'd fought for, and all I could think about was getting this boy home to a warm meal and a soft bed. We were about 3 blocks from the house when the corner newsstand caught my eye. Fresh evening editions were being stacked, and that front-page photo hit like a hammer. Todd on the courthouse steps, face twisted in rage, below a headline screaming about trust fund fraud and offshore accounts. I pulled over and grabbed a copy, the ink still tacky on my fingers. What's that? Ethan asked sleepily. Just the newspaper, bud. Nothing important. I tucked it under the seat. He'd seen enough drama for one day. The house looked different somehow as we pulled up, more like a home again. I helped Ethan with his backpack while fumbling for my keys, the familiar weight of them feeling right in my workshop-scarred hands. First things first, I said, unlocking the porch. Got something that belongs right here. I wheeled out Laura's rocking chair from the workshop where I'd been keeping it safe. The wood gleamed with fresh polish, every joint tested and true. Todd had tried to sell it last month, claiming it was just taking up space. But I knew better. This chair held memories in its grain. Summer evenings with Laura reading to baby Ethan. Winter afternoons with hot chocolate and stories. Mom's chair, Ethan whispered, running his hand along the smooth armrest. That's right, and it's staying right here where it belongs. He nodded, then padded inside to explore. I could hear his careful footsteps down the hallway, checking out his room. The bed was made up fresh. I'd done that this morning, hoping with everything I had that the judge would see truth. My phone buzzed. Mike checking in. How's our boy? He asked. Safe, home. I watched through the screen door as Ethan emerged from his room wrapped in the quilt I'd made him. The cedar smell from my workshop had already worked its way into the fabric. Mike, I can't thank you enough. The way you laid out those records, built that timeline, gave the judge something solid she could trust. You did the hard part, Jake. You kept your head, played it straight, gathered the proof. Speaking of which, you see the evening news yet? Just the headlines. Todd's reputation's going down in flames, isn't it? Like a house built with bad lumber. Between the fraud charges and that courthouse meltdown, he won't recover. Not professionally, not socially. The repayment order's bad enough, but this finishes him. Ethan had settled into the rocking chair, the motion slow and peaceful. The setting sun caught his face just right. Laura's eyes, Laura's quiet smile. Gotta go, Mike. Time to start being a family. I sat on the porch step, listening to the gentle creak of well-fitted wood. Above us, the first stars were starting to show. Uncle Jake? Ethan's voice was thoughtful. Is he really not coming back? No, buddy. The judge made sure of that. He has to pay back all the money he took, and now everyone knows what he did. He can't hurt us anymore. The rocking slowed as he considered this. The same chair Todd had dismissed as worthless now held something beyond price, a boy finding his way back to trust, to safety. I turned to face him fully. Listen, Ethan, I want you to remember something important. A man who protects family never loses.